Hey everybody, it's Survey Program. This episode contains some introductory level spoilers for Final Fantasy, like multiple games in the series. I mean, Aerith dies, you know this, I know this, everybody knows this. Some adult language, and not much else, really, I would say. I don't think that there's any major, I haven't played much Final Fantasy, but I don't think there's any major spoilers here that would prevent you from listening if you're like me and also haven't played. Music for this episode is from Final Fantasy X. Oh, and our guest Griever was showing me some slides during this episode. They're not essential, but you can check them out at the link in the description. And I tried, I'm sorry, but there's no way to get them to show up on YouTube for the automatic upload. Blame YouTube, not me. Welcome to Survey Program. I'm joined by my friend Serena, who you might know as Griever from episodes of my previous podcast and previous live streams. How's it going, Serena?
It's going pretty good. I've been very excited to talk to you about this subject because I really like Deltarune and I really like Undertale, but I'm crazy about Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I know very little about Final Fantasy, so I know you're planning to sort of give me a crash course basically in like the basics, but let me elucidate for you my history with Final Fantasy.
Okay.
Which is I played Tactics Advance.
Ooh.
I played Crystal Chronicles, and I did quite enjoy that. I played Kingdom Hearts
All right.
1 and 2. And
nice.
GBA one, Chain of Memories. And I played the Mario basketball game where there's some Final Fantasy characters that you can play as for DS. Yeah. And so that is my entire history with Final Fantasy. I don't know anything else about it. But obviously, this is one of my biggest blind spots culturally. A number of the episodes of the show are me trying to fill in my cultural blind spots for things that inspired Undertale and Deltarune, and that involves a lot of iconic JRPGs which I just simply haven't played.
Yeah, and Final Fantasy is maybe besides Dragon Quest, it is probably the most sort of the JRPG that everything else draws inspiration from. Definitely things draw from Dragon Quest, and I don't know shit about Dragon Quest.
It's true that Final Fantasy is way more popular than Dragon Quest in the West, right? But in Japan, it's the other way around. Or they're closer.
I think so. Yeah, they're definitely a lot closer. Dragon Quest is a big fucking deal in Japan, and all that good stuff. But Final Fantasy is also really big over there.
I know even less about Dragon Quest. I know there's the blue slime. And that's
the blue slime.
That's it. That's literally it. That's all I can tell you about Dragon Quest.
Right. Well,
here's the fact of the matter. I'm not qualified to be hosting a podcast about Deltarune, but nobody else was. So,
hey, whatever. We're just chatting here.
Yeah.
That being said,
so tell me what is Final Fantasy then? Because I have played only the weirdest spinoffs, basically.
Yeah. So. Well, I've got a PowerPoint to show you, and it might not explain very much, to be honest, but it is here, and it should explain a little bit. So,
all right, so I'm gonna go ahead and I guess I'll share these slides in the description, at a link in the description.
Yeah. So, so here's the first slide. It's Survey Program. It's the Final Fantasy episode, and it's that one time that I made my character look like you for a day for no reason.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, it was great. So this is from Final Fantasy 14. It's the MMO. A lot of people play it. It's a big deal. It's got a crazy free trial, but we're not going to be really talking about it too much today because probably the largest inspirations for Deltarune especially come from the earlier games.
Yeah.
Although I will say that Temmie does play Final Fantasy 14 and has gotten really into it and has a lot of cute art about it. So, if you've ever played 14, go check that out.
They should do a wait, they actually are doing a collab. There is a Final Fantasy Undertale
There is a
collab.
Final Fantasy collab. I almost
I
forgot
talked about it on the
that.
podcast briefly. Yeah, is that out yet, or is that still
God,
forthcoming?
I don't know. I don't know. I think some of it's out. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started. So the first big thing I want to say with regards to Final Fantasy and Deltarune is that the is Gaster. There's a guy.
Whoa! Holy shit! Wait, we're coming in hot here.
So fun fact: there is a character in Final Fantasy VII named Doctor Gast.
What the hell?
This has nothing to really do with Deltarune besides the fact that his name is Doctor Gast and he dies before the game starts. Um, I just think that's really funny.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Um, there's also other lore stuff about him, but that's not really important. Also, this theme tune right here might be familiar. I don't know if like I want to just play it for you and like you listen to it on your own for like a minute or
Here, play
how.
play it. Do go ahead and play it. I think it'll come through
Alright.
for me. So, oh my god, oh my god, Doctor Gaster, is that you? That's the goddamn royal scientist.
It's the royal scientist. It's Wing Gaster. He's the royal scientist. All right, you get the
Yeah,
idea.
all right. Yeah, that's pretty freaky.
So yeah, Gaster. I don't know why he's Final Fantasy VII, but he is a little. He's got a little Final Fantasy in him, I guess. Now you know.
Yeah.
Okay. But for real. So basics of Final Fantasy. It's like the classic JRPG, unless you're Dragon Quest. And the way that I see them, at least personally, is that they're very character driven and they have a lot of very twisty plots. Even the like simple ones with like Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3, they're all on the NES, so games didn't really get very complex plots at the time. They go a few weird places. Um, like Final Fantasy 1 is all about having a little time loop. Like you don't find this out until like the end of the game, but it's it's essentially a time loop of the main villain and the main heroes trying to defeat each other at different points in the game.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's sort of neat. And like, it doesn't get fleshed out a lot, but it gets a little weird with it. And I think Final Fantasy to me, uh, the thing that I like about it, as far as RPGs goes, is like they're big games. They're like big name releases, but they do like to get weird with it. And as far as I can tell, Dragon Quest is more like simple story executed well. You're going from town to town, solving their problems, and fighting a big bad guy that you know sort of from the beginning. But Final Fantasy is a lot more twisty with it.
Hmm.
There's a lot of art by Yoshitaka Amano, and a lot of art by Tetsuya Nomura, who I'm sure you recognize from Kingdom Hearts.
Yep.
Lots of fashion, like this lady here, Lulu, with the dress with like a million belts on
Yeah.
it.
That's I can tell a Nomura design from a mile away because there's a crazy amount of belts.
Yes. And then also like there's an MMO with a very expansive retrial. Um, I think I've tried recommending it to you, but there's only the one bird girl in it, so I
And it's
can't.
just like I just don't have time for playing
Yeah,
an MMO. That's my
also
life.
true. Fair enough. Probably for the best. So yeah, it's a pretty classic RPG. It's like you've played other RPGs, right? You go to places, you explore, you fight things. You don't do the Undertale thing of like saving monsters or sparing them or whatever. You're just doing a lot of like monster killing and a lot of plot happens.
Hmm.
Lots of crazy cutscenes, all that good stuff. So, like, one thing that I want to note is that in Dragon Quest, battle scenes look like this, and in
Hmm.
Earthbound, battle scenes look like this. And you've got a picture of Undertale right there with the Frogget. And it's all like head on, face first. You're looking directly at the enemy, and you've got some UI around you.
Yeah.
And Final Fantasy did it a little bit differently, which is that you have the party members sort of all in a row, like you see them all, they're all reacting to the fight. You choose each of them to do a thing, and it sort of becomes like a left to right battle in
Yeah,
a
so it's
sense.
much more Deltarune's much more like Final Fantasy than the like
Del-
Earthbound style.
yeah, that's sort of my general feeling on it for sure. Obviously, their battle systems are not very similar ultimately, but their aesthetics are more inspired by Final Fantasy, I think. Here's the thing. Did you know that Swoon is from Final Fantasy IV?
No, I did not know that.
Me neither, but I
That's a
learned
sick ass
it.
bird on this. That's a sick ass crazy dragon
That's
raven thing on that slide
yeah,
though.
that it is a pretty sick ass bird. Oh, there's a lot of really good enemy designs in Final Fantasy. So something I learned shortly after Deltarune came out, and shortly after like dying to the night a million times because I didn't feel like going back and grabbing the Shadow Mental, was that the word swoon is sort of the effect. It's there because Final Fantasy IV had a very weird translation. So they didn't have a lot of characters to work with in like these text boxes, right?
Yeah.
So so you might have a message that says the enemy was instantly defeated, or like the enemy was instantly killed by this sword or whatever.
Hmm.
So to save as much space as possible, they just said swoon in the top, and then the enemy dies, because it's the instant death effect. So, and it's also caused by the Deathbringer blade that you get near the start of the game, I believe, which in the original Final Fantasy IV, I also learned was called the Black Sword. So
Interesting.
there's some there's some references there. There's references and places when you know where to look for them, I guess. Um, Speaking of references, the opera scene in Undertale, that's also a pretty obvious reference to the opera scene in Final Fantasy VI. There's an opera in there. Um, and they have a pretty similar song in there. In Final Fantasy VI, it's a very moving moment where like one of the characters gets to like let loose a little bit and like not be so like tense all the time and sort of be more emotive, I guess.
Hmm.
And it gets referenced later on in a much more serious scene later. But also she sings during it, and you have like uh these little notes that play in the song that sound like singing, despite the fact that it's on a Super Nintendo and they can't really have voice acting yet.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. It was pretty cool at the time, I think. I'm pretty sure. I wasn't really there at the time. Um, so, that's another big reference. Besides that, though, most of Final Fantasy's influences on Undertale and Deltarune, I think, are more subtle, or they're more like thematic, or they're more like baked into influencing the RPG genre in general.
Hmm.
Um, so like, uh, Final Fantasy, you get a lot of options during combat. They're generally pretty easy games, with the exception of a few bullshit fights here and there, as any good RPG should have. And but for the most part, Deltarune is definitely more inspired by something like Earthbound or stuff like that. It's just that Final Fantasy came even before that, so so there's just stuff that leaked in, is my opinion. Any questions so far?
I have I have a sort of a broad narrative one, but I'm wondering if you might touch it in the presentation. So I've noted it down and I'm gonna save it for afterwards.
Okay, will do. So let's keep on going. You said you played Kingdom Hearts, right?
Yep. So I'm familiar with I'm familiar with like the big iconic Final Fantasy characters,
Yeah.
right? Both through that and
Yeah.
just through broad cultural osmosis, and like sometimes
Right.
they're in Smash Brothers.
Yeah, you've seen Cloud and Sephiroth fight. You've
Mhm.
seen Tifa punch a wall or
I know
whatever, I
Aerith
guess.
dies.
Aerith dies. Least most crazy spoiler of all time that everybody knows forever.
Yeah,
Um so the thing that I wanted to mention with regards to Kingdom Hearts was when I think about the act system for uh Undertale and Deltarune, I always appreciate how much like flavor it adds to a fight and how much it like adds to like making each fight with even just the simple enemies feel like very different. Each
yeah,
encounter feels like their own sort of thing. And I think like while it might not have been like an inspiration for that, I do think of Kingdom Hearts 2 in that regard because Kingdom Hearts 2, for those who don't know, have these things called reaction commands. And essentially you just press triangle and your main character Sora does something, and usually it's something fun that interacts with like that particular enemy. You can Some are like little side swipes behind them, some are like you grab their weapon and start beating them up with it. Some of them are just like, okay, you do a quick time event cutscene now, and some of them get a little bit more complicated, but for the most part, they're pretty simple, but they add a lot of flavor to a fight. And I think there's a pretty nice similarity between that and the way that acts add a lot of flavor to a fight in Deltarune and Undertale. Is just like, it doesn't do a lot. It doesn't like have a lot of mechanical like implications every time it shows up. But whenever it does show up, it's pretty nice. It's just
yeah. It's
fun.
fun. It makes the random encounters feel distinct, and it's just like
Yeah,
a little twist to just what would otherwise just be kind of a grindy regular enemy fight.
yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to bring that up because, that's sort of something that I sort of recognized was similar to another thing.
Hmm.
Um, so let's see. I don't. I think I wanted to go over some thematic and aesthetic comparisons with Deltarune, but I'm not sure that I actually put that into the presentation here. So I just want to say that Final Fantasy, as I stated before, has a lot of like Nomura and Amano character designs, and there's a lot of fun monsters. There's a lot of cool anime boys, hot anime women. You know the drill.
Yeah.
Um, and like thematically, each game is dealing with something different. I forget if you. I'm not sure exactly what you know. I guess you probably figured this out already, but each Final Fantasy is like a whole different game and a whole different world.
This is exactly what I
Um,
was going to ask about. That's yeah. I figured you were going to cover it because I know they're not like sequential sequels to each other, right? They're
yeah,
like sort of remixes of similar themes. There's similar like types of characters. There's archetypes, right? There's
right.
Moogles or whatever, but it's not the same story and it's not the same world, right?
Yeah. So, yes, exactly. So, like, yeah, that's something that I actually do want to discuss real quick is like each world is different. Each world takes place in a different place entirely. The world of Final Fantasy VII, which centers around a big cyberpunk city that's trying to drain the lifeblood of the planet, is very different from Final Fantasy IX, which is very medieval, very high fantasy, or high-ish fantasy. I guess it probably isn't high fantasy. Lots of colorful characters, a lot less grimy class structure stuff
Yeah.
going on in there. Um, and it's comparatively very charming, despite the fact that it also deals a lot with people dying a lot in that game. Um, if I had to say anything with regards to the theme of Final Fantasy games, I'd say that it talks about mortality a lot and how to like and how people sort of live their lives in the face of like bad shit going down and
Mm-hmm.
like people close to them dying and all that sort of stuff. It does come up a lot in a lot of different games, and I think it does very well in 7. It does it really well in 9, in 10. Lots of in 6 as well. Lots of the Final Fantasy games really deal pretty deep in that subject. Um, and let's see. Now I've kind of lost my train of thought, but that's sort of like the big theme of a lot of Final Fantasy games. There's a lot of other themes. Final Fantasy VII is like uh, ostensibly about capitalist forces like trying to drain the lifeblood of the planet and how you have to stop that. And
Final
how it
Fantasy
like
15 is about taking a road trip with your boys.
Final Fantasy 15 is about taking your road trip with your boys, um, and also about fate and stuff. But that's less fun.
Yeah, it's about confronting
uh,
fate with your boys. But I was familiar with Final Fantasy 15 because Xteen, who was on episode 7 of this show,
oh yeah,
is big into that. And
yeah,
also, I
yeah,
enjoyed the Christine Love RPG that Toby Fox is actually tangentially related to the show because Toby Fox contributed one of the guest item descriptions to Get in the Car Loser, which is kind of a riff on that similar kind of like car based RPG. Great game, very
yeah,
fun. Um,
yeah.
but the reason why I wanted to bring that up, or the reason why I was thinking about, the sort of the repetition of motifs and character types and stuff while not being the same story across Final Fantasy games is pretty similar to what's happening between Undertale and Deltarune, isn't it?
It is because like Undertale and Deltarune, they share a lot of overlap in like characters and names and like ideas, but they're also very clearly not in the same world.
Yeah.
Um, unless like unless there's like some weird shit happening, in which case like that's a whole other ball to drop. But like we'll get there when we get there. It could be sort of a well, that would be pretty big spoilers for a different RPG series, but so I won't talk about that. It could be a situation like a very different game. Is what I was gonna is what I was about to say. Um, but yeah, so in Final Fantasy, like there tends to be like a lot of similar stuff. There's your summons like Bahamut and Ifrit and Shiva. There's your like there's a guy named Sid who usually works on like an airship. Um, there's Moogles, there's Chocobos. Sometimes there's named characters like Biggs and Wedge who are themselves like referencing Star Wars because
Yeah.
that's a Star Wars joke.
Yeah.
But like generally, like your entire main cast of characters, what you're doing, doesn't really have very much to do with any previous game in the series. There can be parallels, but like it's sort of like how in the main gameplay of Deltarune, like you're fighting against King, you're fighting against Queen, Tenna, the Knight. None of those motherfuckers show up in Undertale.
Yeah.
Um, all Undertale's all about the people that are in the town not really doing anything. Like uh, in the town of Del of in the hometown of Deltarune, I mean, like like we've been saying in this podcast, like nobody's really had an outward effect on the world if they're from Undertale, even if they're kind of important. Toriel hasn't done anything in the Dark Worlds. Asgore has been very cryptic, but he hasn't done anything, and who knows if he actually will. Sans is like hitting on our mom. like
Yeah.
none of that's like the same plot purpose that they have in the original
Hmm.
um Undertale. So like there is sort of a similarity between Final Fantasy and Deltarune in the sense that they are taking this sort of like different story but familiar concepts sort of approach to it. So, with all that being said, I think I want to go to the main meat of like the things that I like to compare between Final Fantasy and Deltarune, which is the characters. I've got some characters from a few different Final Fantasies that I'm going to start comparing between Susie, Ralsei, and Chris. With Chris sort of being the big one, because Chris is probably my favorite character in Deltarune right now. Because they're very interesting. We don't know everything about them, and like they've just got a lot going on from the sounds of it.
All right.
So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start comparing the characters Susie and Cecil from Final Fantasy IV. Now, Cecil Harvey is the main character of Final Fantasy IV. The big thing with Cecil is that he starts the game as a Dark Knight, and he becomes a paladin later in the story. And this has some gameplay implications that come along with it, and some like thematic implications that come along with it as well. You can see some sprite work here. You can see some Yoshitaka Amano art of Cecil and his two forms here. Very, very pretty man. Like he knows how to draw very pretty men. So the big thing with Cecil that comes to mind for me is that he's sort of like, he's not a super complicated character. He's got just enough going on to be pretty interesting, especially in like early Super Nintendo era like RPG stuff. Like I think this game came out in like 1991. Final Fantasies 1, 2, and 3 aren't quite so character driven yet, but Final Fantasy IV is where the storytelling really starts to get going a little bit. And the thing that gets to me about Cecil is that he starts out as a Dark Knight, sort of violent, sort of carrying this burden on him, where he feels like his status as a Dark Knight is leading to him like caring less and less about people and shutting down more and more of his emotions as time goes on, which he doesn't really like, because he is a fairly empathetic person when you get down to it. And like the big thing with him is that Final Fantasy IV opens up and you're riding an airship and you're Cecil and you're commanding a fleet of like guys on your ship, and everybody's depressed. Everybody's depressed because you have just gone to like a kingdom far away from your own, taken the crystal there. Crystals also show up in a lot of Final Fantasy games. And just killed a lot of people for it, and they weren't really fighting back about it. And everybody's like, are we the bad guys in this situation? Including Cecil. So when he gets back to the kingdom, he's like, hey, our troops are like feeling pretty bad about what we've done. Can you tell us why we did any of that? And immediately the king's like, okay, are you committing treason on me? Because I'm not going to stand for that. So Cecil like he's got a whole like emotional turmoil sort of arc going on. He does some atrocities against his will. He decides that he's not going to take that anymore, and then he like tries to do things to make himself better, but he's also sort of holding on to like getting revenge against like some of the people who wrong him throughout the story. Mostly this guy named Golbez, who, while he's gone from the kingdom, seems to be also killing people that in ways that he doesn't really like, in pretty terrifying ways. So the thing with Cecil is that he grows into somebody who's like really standing up for himself more, standing up for other people more, protecting other people, and like sort of taking off his like armor and mask as time goes on. Metaphorically, he sort of takes it off all at once in the story. And there's a big moment where he becomes a paladin, sort of by going through this trial of mount ordeals. And he goes up to a place, he becomes a paladin, and then he has to fight like a shadowy version of himself. Um, and the way that you have to beat him is a very iconic moment in the story because you have to not fight at all. You have to just let Cecil sit there and not attack.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like while it's not the same, it does make me think a lot of Susie
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Susie like also has this big gameplay moment of like you have this unique one-on-one fight where you're not really entirely in control of what's going on. Um, you have this whole thing where like Cecil has to stay still and defend and not attack while his clone expends all his energy on using an attack that you've had up until this point, which drains your own HP away.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that sort of parallels Susie's fight with Lancer, where she stops attacking at the very end and realizes that she doesn't want to do this, and that there's a lot that her front of like violence and um, her front of violence and attacking and all that sort of stuff isn't getting her what she wants. She wants to talk it all out. It just
Yeah.
hasn't worked up until then. Um, or maybe she hasn't really tried that before. So it's all just very unusual to her.
And then like fighting the shadow version of himself, Cecil does it. I mean, Susie's approach to the dark world seems initially very similar to the Knights, which is very much like I'm here to fight. I'm here to cleave a path of destruction. And we talked a little bit
Yeah.
about this in the December episode, where again, if you're assuming December is the night, then December's destruction of Dessa's destruction of like the physical objects in her room could also like sort of be similar to that sort of violence first perspective on things and not valuing darkness as people. And so that Susie being sort of this like anti-knight figure, this like the real opposite of the knight, the girl with hope crossed on her heart, is very interesting, right? And it definitely does feel like an analog there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for both of these characters, this is sort of the moment where they start to really like care, right?
Yeah,
Um, so how do we and it's also a great moment because for both of them it's represented entirely in a fight. It's like entirely through gameplay. Which during Final Fantasy IV they weren't like they didn't really have a lot of like ways to do that, but they did it really quite well here.
yeah,
Um, so what comes next? Well, they've the one big thing about them is that they also have beam attacks. The big thing with they have very violent attacks where they just shoot a big energy wave at a bunch of monsters. This is more of a aesthetic similarity, but I did want to mention it. This is
it's
the
a
move where
buster.
like that it is a buster. It is a buster. Um, they're both busted. Uh, yeah, it's more of an aesthetic sort of thing, but I thought it was worth mentioning. This is the attack that Cecil has as a Dark Knight, where he's like, you're spending HP to do a big AoE attack, and that's very useful in the early game, to be honest. But it's also like it also hurts him, um, which has a lot of implications there.
Yeah,
Obviously, it's very emotionally resonant to like his whole character arc, and I think that's a pretty good starting spot for where we end up with Susie, who I would say is like a much more modern like sort of take on that style of character. I think, um, sort of learning and like this is sort of exemplified later when they both learn how to heal. When Cecil becomes a paladin, he learns a little bit of healing. It's not as good as your white mages, but it's there.
mm-hmm.
And his whole kit transforms from okay, I'm gonna be the big damage healer to okay, I can tank I can take hits for other characters, I can heal, and I can do a little bit of damage. Um, and I think that also quite well mirrors like Susie's whole development in that space. So yeah, I think like while these two characters are definitely different, obviously, I think that there's something there. And
Absolutely.
one last thing with Cecil, betrayal. He gets betrayed sometimes. Um, I don't know to what extent that's going to happen in Deltarune with Susie and like Chris and Ralsei, but like uh, one thing with Cecil is that he is betrayed on multiple occasions by his best friend Kane Highwind, and it's like, okay, he's being betrayed by a guy named Kane. How could we have not? How could we have not seen this coming?
Yeah.
Um, but like the whole thing with Kane is like Kane, Cecil, and Kane and a woman named Rosa are all these friends, and Cecil and Rosa like love each other. They get married at the end of Final Fantasy IV. It's like not. It's like a pretty done deal. Kane also loves Rosa, but he doesn't really like talk about this at all, and like he just sort of holds on to that and like doesn't really like emote about it at all. It's just something in the back of his mind, essentially.
Hmm.
But for him, it's sort of this like bit of weakness that lets the main bad guy mind control him from time to time. It's a weakness that lets somebody get into his head. Um, and I don't know, like I don't think that this necessarily means that I don't think this necessarily has any specific implications on Susie or anything, but like I don't know. There's like a little bit of a love triangle that Susie's sort of completely unaware of, right? like, uh, she's got a whole thing with Noelle, but Chris has a whole thing with Noelle, and she doesn't know either part of that.
And I think especially in the weird route, it could get very ugly very quickly.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So I just figured that would be worth mentioning. So, do you have any questions for me before we move on to what I've got to say about Ralsei?
I mean, just that you're kind of blowing my mind here with the so far. I feel like there's definitely a lot here, and now I'm interested to see the next one.
Oh yeah. So this one is about Ralsei and fan favorite Final Fantasy character Vivi from Final Fantasy IX. You might recognize Vivi because Vivi shows up in Kingdom Hearts 2, and also Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with Magic the Gathering, you might know that Vivi has ruined the game for a brief period of time. I think Vivi's been banned from Standard, but he's a very powerful card. He's also adorable, and he's got a funny little hat on. And we know how characters with hats are when it comes to parallels with Ralsei.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, Vivi is probably one of my favorite characters. Maybe like I think I like Vivi more than I like Ralsei. He's I'm not sure he's more complicated necessarily, but he's like his whole story is very hard hitting. Um, and this boy can hold so much existentialism. Like this this like shows up during the start screen as like one of the character tags. Uh I'll just read it out. It's the like start screen of Vivi that says sorrow and the quote, "How do you prove that you exist? Maybe we don't exist."
Ah.
um and you know, if that doesn't make you think about Ralsei, then you know, I don't know what will.
Yeah.
Um, so the big thing with Ralsei and Vivi is that they're both very sweet, they're both very kind, they're both very cute. Um, they're both magic. They got some magic stuff going on, although all of Vivi's magic is offense because that's just how they do black mages in Final Fantasy. They tend to split
Although
up.
there
Although,
is the fact that Ralsei is capable of instantly destroying the statue in Chapter 4.
also, that is true.
That seems to be concealing some greater offensive power.
Yes, for sure. So, so there's definitely an element of that there. They've got a lot of similarities just aesthetically. They're also a little clumsy. um, I love this GIF that I posted. There's a bunch of little times that Vivi will like trip during a scene, and it's like usually during the sillier ones. It's never during like the actually dead serious ones.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always like a cute little character quirk. He's a little clumsy, but not that clumsy. He's a little boy with a lot of destructive power in him. Um, and that's not really what his arc is all about, though.
Yeah.
His whole arc is about facing the question of mortality very head on. So the big thing with Vivi is that early into the game, you'll see the top left image over here a little bit. Very early into the game, you find this little factory where a bunch of other black mages are being manufactured, which throws Vivi's entire life into question of like, what am I exactly? What sort of being am I if these things that are just like me are being manufactured in front of my eyes?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and a lot of the game is dedicated to him finding out what it means for him, what those things mean to him, and as we later see, like what it means for the other black mages to be people, and what it means for him to be a black mage, and like the fact that they actually have a very short lifespan and are sort of and don't really have a lot of time to come to terms with or even really understand the idea of death in the way that Vivi sort of has.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's a lot of fear and anxiety when it comes to Vivi. But there's also a lot of joy. There's a lot of like coming to love and enjoy the company of his friends who he makes throughout the journey. There's a lot of like trying to comfort other people and like sort of figure out what it means to live and all that sort of stuff. It's a wonderful story, and I really quite like it. And I think if you played Final Fantasy IX, you would quite like it too. Final Fantasy IX is a very charming game. Rase, as you know, also goes through a whole lot. He's also sort of, it feels like he's gone through Ralsei's, it feels like he's gone through Vivi's whole thing of like having to know a lot more than he wants to and know the nature of his own existence and coming to terms with it in sort of a much less healthy way, which is to sort of unperson himself a little bit and only with the help of his friends sort of get himself out of that idea while that fear and anxiety creeps back into his life. But there is a lot to compare and contrast between them, which is why I sort of wanted to bring this up, even if I'm not necessarily like super keen on like the finer details of all of it. I think the other two images I compare here are like there's a definite effect that like friendship has on both of them, and like finding meaning in life besides like whatever fate is destined to befall them and all that sort of stuff. It's
you are not the first person to make this point to me, actually.
Really?
Friend of the show and two-time guest Jackie was also recently playing Final Fantasy IX and messaging me like, this Ralsei is such a Vivi type character. So you are definitely not like, you are on a track that I think, you're not alone in on this line of inquiry for sure.
You're not alone. All right. Yeah, that's yeah. They've definitely got a lot in common. And I think while Ralsei is definitely fixated on something else for sure, there's a lot in common between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, the similarities are probably even more pronounced than they are with like Susie and Cecil, who, while they have a very notable gameplay and story integration moment together, like they are very different people. Ralsei and Vivi are like actually fairly similar as people,
Mm-hmm.
comparatively at least. Um, that's sort of my big thing with those two is like they're very cute, they're very sweet, they're carrying the world on their shoulders, and they're just trying to figure out how to live their life, and what that even means. So that's Ralsei and Vivi, but there's one more pair of characters that I think have are sort of even crazier as far as like comparisons go.
I'm very
Uh,
curious about this one. As someone who's never played Final Fantasy VII, I'm really excited
yeah.
to see where this one's going.
So you know Cloud Strife, sort of. Um, he is the guy with the big sword. He's blonde like Final Fantasy VII man. He puts on a dress that one time.
Yep.
He shows up in he shows up in a lot of places. He's the Final Fantasy guy. Um, what you probably don't know about Cloud is that he is a deeply unreliable narrator. Did you know that?
I did
Did
not
you
know
know?
that. No.
So, by the way, Final Fantasy VII spoilers inbound because this is um, everybody's heard. The thing with Final Fantasy VII is that Aerith's death is like the big spoiler of the game, right? Because you don't have characters just fucking dying on you in an RPG and have to carry on without them. Like, especially not in 1997.
Yeah.
Um, but this also, but Aerith's death also sort of has the additional effect of masking like the real big fucking twist of Final Fantasy VII, which is that Cloud is not really like he's got a lot going on, much more than you think at first, and he doesn't really know this. So as you can see, I've got some pictures right here. There's a picture on the left, which is like from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and it's of Cloud and Tifa and Sephiroth all taking a picture together. This is during like a flashback portion of the game where Cloud is telling his story of like how he knows who Sephiroth is, what happened between him, what happened between them, why he knows they're a bad guy, and like his general tragic backstory of his entire home being burned to a crisp. With Tifa being his like childhood best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the picture on the right is from the original Final Fantasy VII, and it features just a completely different fucking guy there. Some dude with black hair instead of blonde hair,
Huh.
seeming to carry a Buster sword on him, and it's very. And while the picture isn't exactly the same, the idea is like still. I think the picture is probably just going to have like the same backdrop in the left one when they do that in whatever the third game is, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So the big thing here is that his Cloud's flashback didn't happen the way he said it. Cloud has this whole flashback sequence after you leave like the first major city of the game. Um, but uh, as you find out much later, Tifa listened to this story and was very confused by it, and she's shrugging it off because uh, she wants to keep this guy close. She wants to keep Cloud close because he's a good friend of hers, and he uh, has a lot going on, and she wants to make sure that he's safe. At a certain point, though, Sephiroth gives this picture to Cloud and Tifa, um, to like in an attempt to sort of break Cloud's mind. And Cloud's like, okay, well, this is obviously fake because this didn't happen that way. But Tifa is like freaking out because this is the version of events that she remembers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's hard to explain everything that's going on there because it does rely on a lot of Final Fantasy VII knowledge. But the big thing with Cloud is that he's not who he says he is, and he's not quite who he thinks he is.
Mm-hmm.
And his whole identity is up for grabs throughout the game. So he is sort of an unreliable narrator, and I'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay.
Now, interesting thing with Cloud is that he has a big role model as a child, and that role model is Sephiroth. This is also something that people tend not to know based off of Sephiroth's appearance in other games, because, like, when Sephiroth appears in other games, like, he's got a big sword, he's mysterious, you fight him, he's a crazy hard boss, and then he leaves. They don't really tell you that Sephiroth is a war hero. So at a very young age, Cloud looks up to Sephiroth and is like, I'm going to leave the village that I'm from and become a soldier, and I'm going to become a hero like Sephiroth. And there's some very complicated feelings there because, you know, Sephiroth becomes very obviously a bad dude later on. And there's a picture of the knight in the top right here for reasons. It could be anything.
That should be fairly obvious. Again,
obvious.
Let's take a quick 5-minute timeout here because I feel like it actually has. There have been. Okay, I told myself getting into this podcast, I'm not going to be like throwing stones at specific, other members of the fandom. So I'm not going to point stones at any specific thing. But in general, there has been a resurgence over the last few months of like, Des is not the knight contrarianism, right? And so let me just take another moment to say that, again, while this is not like a game theory type lore podcast, right? Where we're not like, we're talking about themes, we're talking about similarities, we're talking about the narrative, but I'm not really interested in like laying out like a thesis for why certain things are going to happen. Just,
right.
Just sort of creating a space to explore the possibilities of what may happen and what the inspirations for them may be. However, I will say this is another great example of like that kind of story of the antagonist of your story being this like, the antagonist of your story, being a former friend, being someone who was, has many admirable qualities and has turned against you and against your party in some way that is complicated, right? Is just infinitely more compelling of a story than like it's the evil mayor woman who's always evil and has always been evil and she sucks and there's no redeeming factor at all. Well, how is that exciting? How is that interesting? That's not interesting. Carol Knight's not fucking interesting. All right, sorry about that. Sorry to go on my little rant, but I just felt like it was a necessary thing to say again.
But Kate, imagine the narrative payoff if it's Rudy.
No, here's the thing. I will listen to you if you're a Rudy Knighter, because that could be interesting. Because Rudy, similarly, is a character who we've been introduced to sympathetically, right?
Right, yeah.
So, like, yes, I'm sympathetic to Rudy Knight. If you're saying fucking Carol Knight, or God fucking forbid, Azrael Knight, shut the fuck up. Then that sucks. However, everything I just said does also apply to it applies to Rudy as well as Des. So I will give a space for Rudy Knight people because that could be super interesting. Right. However, I still think it's Des. But anyway, sorry, go on.
I also think it's Des. I think that's just the most interesting way it could happen. But we're talking about Sephiroth right now, who is Cloud's role model. Yeah, carries a big sword. Has a black cloak, does a lot of aura farming, and most interestingly, spends a lot of time like finding ways to control Cloud. Usually there's a little bit of mind control going on there, but it's not very clear at first that that's what's going on. Mm-hmm. It takes a bit. And hold on. Okay, for some reason it was like, for some reason my window was stuck in a weird like ratio for some reason. Um, so, the thing with Sephiroth and the thing with the Knight is that they're both, assuming it's Des, which I'm going to because that's the more fun way to do things, is that like these are people that like the main character, Cloud or Chris, look up to, but it's clear that their relationship has gotten a lot more complicated. Even if Cloud's flashback is incorrect, the way that he feels about Sephiroth, the way that he feels like he's being controlled while still like having that little bit of respect for him, but having it sort of eradicated, is interesting. And meanwhile, Chris, who knows what's going on there, but there's probably an element of looking up to Des as well for them.
Yeah.
And so there's this very there's this push and pull between them, which you don't really get in a lot of other things, because by the time you're in like Final Fantasy VII Advent Children or Smash Brothers or Kingdom Hearts, they're just fighting. You don't have any of that context there.
They've been replaced by a character-shaped signifier entirely.
Yeah, exactly. So Cloud, Cloud has Sephiroth as his role model. He also has another guy as his role model, but he doesn't remember this. So, and I don't really know if I'm going to have very much time to talk about him or bring him up, but we'll see. Another thing I want to compare about Cloud and Chris, gender,
Yeah.
just a little bit of it. Now, the Cloud dress scene is like, it's like fun, it's like there, but mostly this isn't really like the biggest thing with Cloud, to be honest. Most of Cloud's relationship with masculinity is sort of his relationship with like finding Sephiroth as like a war hero role model and like wanting to be like him to prove himself to a girl, to Tifa.
Mm-hmm.
But and like that's sort of it is definitely a masculine thing to want to be like this war hero or whatever. But also it's like it's Sephiroth that he wants to be,
right.
A little
It's
bit
not
like,
exactly
right?
the most like, manly man.
It's not really, yeah, exactly. Um and meanwhile Chris has, we could go on and on about Chris. Everybody here already knows a lot about Chris's relationship to all that sort of thing.
Unless you're listening backwards or something, in which case you might not have heard episode 6, and maybe you should go listen to episode 6.
Yeah, go do that. So like there's a little bit there, but like the big thing with Cloud also is that throughout the story his identity is like torn down because it's sort of built on false pretenses and memories to begin with, right? Well, I guess I didn't really explain any of that, but yeah, he has false memories, which I sort of alluded to, but like he has false memories, but they're also sort of real. He's just sort of inserting himself into a position that he wasn't actually in.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why he remembers all this stuff correctly, but he's not in the picture, and he's not actually like the like rank he thought he was, and he's not and he's not nearly as strong as like he should be as a like soldier or whatever. And like between hanging out with his friends and having to like take down Sephiroth and like sort of become himself as a person again, this sort of veneer of like simple I want to be the hero man, cool guy sort of thing that Cloud has going on sort of starts to dissipate. Like at the end of the story, like when they're going into the final dungeon, Cloud's like, "All right, let's mosey," and somebody's like, "Can't you say something cool like move out?" like, instead of that. There's also like a part where he gets into a submarine and he's like, "Oh God, my motion sickness is back."
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, this sucks. Can somebody help me out with this? And one of the party members is like, maybe if we put you in the driver's seat of the submarine, it'll help. And he's like, oh, yeah, that actually helped a lot, thanks. And it's like, it's just the story of Final Fantasy VII in general does involve him becoming a lot more tender and caring and like all that sort of stuff. Even in the movie, like Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, which is kind of a mess in a lot of respects, he does end it with an emphatic declaration of there's nothing that he doesn't cherish. He like cares a lot, and and his whole arc is stopping himself from being his like the aloof identity that he's sort of built up in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's some really interesting stuff with Cloud. There's this. You'll notice that I put a GIF here, and the GIF here is of Cloud approaching Aerith at like a place called the Forbidden Temple, and he's pulling out a sword, and like you'll notice that he's like wiggling and doing some weird stuff. That's you like those little wiggles and you trying to move the character away. That's you trying to move him while he doesn't have control of himself.
I see.
Yeah. And sort of a scene and sort of a big scene where Sephiroth has like exerted some amount of control over him because of plot reasons. There's some stuff there. There's another scene a little bit earlier on, right here, where you'll notice that Cloud is like approaching Sephiroth, but you're actually controlling like this like spectral image of like little baby Cloud, I guess, trying to like get him to stop going over there and like give him the big give him the black materia which Sephiroth is going to use to destroy the planet essentially. And I think and like I isn't it crazy that there is a scene where you get like an out of body experience with Cloud Strife where like you don't have control over the main character, you just have control of like a representation of them trying to get them to stop doing something. That shit's crazy in 1997. It's kind of crazy right now, but
right.
I will say this scene does look a little bit rough. The graphics are it's like the scene does look a little bit less clear than say like the Chris in the closet scene, for example.
Yeah, but I mean it's and also similar to like the sword root scene, right? With the where you're controlling little Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. So like there's a big element of loss of control and loss of agency to Cloud's story, and as the story goes on, it feels like more and more of him is slipping, up until like a very pivotal scene later in the game, where like that stuff gets solved. And instead of us really controlling Cloud, we're sort of in like a soul controlling Chris situation. It's more like we're controlling Cloud as best as Cloud can in a situation where he doesn't entirely have control over himself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely different, obviously, because Deltarune is playing a lot more on like the idea of control more directly. But there's a very interesting element of this here, because like usually and even in like the remake version, they just do this shit in a cutscene. But in the original Final Fantasy VII, you are controlling the character. You're not watching. Like taken out of the scene. You're not just watching. You are forced to watch basically while having the illusion of control over something, but you can't really change what's happening. Because it's different from a cutscene because you feel the control being taken away from you as opposed to just having it turn into a movie for a little while.
Yeah. And it's actually similar to what I was talking about in our last episode about like why I enjoyed Half-Life's cutscene approach so much. And
Yeah,
again,
I
you know,
remember that.
similar. It's similar to some moments in Deltarune, like especially the parts in Chapter 3 where you're controlling, you know, with the game characters that I just think are
Right.
still some of the best parts of Deltarune so far.
Yeah, yeah. So a little bit more with Cloud and Chris. Puppets. They get compared to puppets a lot.
Hmm.
Sephiroth calls Cloud a puppet because, you know, Sephiroth is quite literally being able to control him through some sort of means. Um, the translation on Final Fantasy VII is a little bit iffy, so it can be a little bit confusing on to exactly like what the deal is there, but basically, basically, uh, there's a lot of human experiments that go on, and Cloud is part of that, and he doesn't really remember that essentially. And well, yeah. So there's an element of that, and Sephiroth is able to exert his will over him and get him to do the stuff that he wants, which Cloud is like terrified of once he realizes that that's possible because for obvious reasons.
Hmm.
Um, Chris has the puppetry imagery via like Spamton and stuff, which has to deal with a lot more of the like general freedom uh motif, I guess, in Deltarune. So like, but and there's definitely a lot of control imagery and like general stuff with that happening throughout Deltarune between Chris and like the whole weird route as well. Is that there's a lot of loss of agency in both of
Yeah,
these
and
games,
horror about it.
and a lot of horror about it. Yeah. There's also, somewhat relatedly, a little bit of puppy imagery. You know, the gif here is a little bit. This is back when Sephiroth's like a good guy for a little while, but like, he is calling Cloud a puppy here. Um, yeah. I just, I just think that's neat. And I guess like it's a little bit hard to delve into Cloud's whole story because tend to like I tend to like shuffle around the details a lot in my head, and it's hard to keep it all straight. But but there's a lot of mental trauma going on with Cloud and Chris, obviously, and um, you've you know, Cloud has a point in the story where like after a lot of revelations and being told about him from Sephiroth and like a little bit of gaslighting here and there, his mind basically does shatter, and he does like have to be put in a hospital for a little while.
Hmm.
Um, Another crazy fucking part of this game. Uh, and I don't know if this really I don't know if this really parallels Chris's mental trauma because like
We don't know a lot about
there's
it yet.
we don't really know a lot about it.
Yeah.
But there's some shit going on with these two. um, there's a whole sequence in Final Fantasy VII where you're playing as Tifa and you're just in Cloud's mind because you've sort of found your way into the life stream, and it's my favorite scene in the game because it's all about sort of putting Cloud's personality back together again and finding out like what truly happened to him, and him sort of being able to like actually like remember like what and him sort of being able to actually remember like what his whole deal is and what parts of himself he was hiding from himself and like trying to cover up by like sort of implanting the identity of another guy onto himself,
Hmm.
um which is a whole thing.
Yeah.
um
And I mean, filling
and
that gulf in your own identity with that, you know, looking at another person like that. I mean, you know, you see Chris's room has half, you know, everything in Chris's room is gone, right? There's no, or
yeah,
was never there, right? Chris is a totally blank room compared to their
right,
brother.
right, yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot going on with these two. I think there's a lot of very interesting parallels between Chris and Cloud that like the average like person wouldn't really be able to like see, because like again, when you see Cloud in like a different game, it's like he's cool, he's wielding the Buster Sword, he's got big swings, he's ruining Smash 4 doubles. Uh,
It's so
you
true.
know, and like but uh what you don't really notice is that like for a while that's like the front that Cloud's putting up in Final Fantasy VII, and it's true that he is like legitimately cool, but he also like sort of he sort of makes it until he breaks it for a while, and then like puts himself back together and like slaps the shit out of Sephiroth at the end of game, um, as one does at the end of these types of things. And I just think that Cloud's very interesting. I think that Chris is very interesting, and I think like the weird like agency shit going on with the two of them is like really cool.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I
um,
didn't know about any of this.
yeah. So now you know a little bit more about some Final Fantasy games. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't think so. I mean, okay, actually, I kind of have one question, and it's not. It's only
Yeah.
sort. It's only tangentially related, but it's like there's so many. Is each numbered Final Fantasy game in a different setting entirely, or are some of them, or do some of them like talk to each other? Like, are some of them continuations of each other's narratives?
There, um, 12 and Tactics happen in the same setting.
Okay.
I think that's it. um, I think, and I don't think and even 12 and Tactics, I don't think are really talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the most part, they're very different games each time. I think Final Fantasy VII, I will say that thematically, they're always trying to mix it up a little bit. Um, so like Final Fantasy VII is about like a soldier, right? It's
Yeah.
about Cloud. It's about like eco-terrorism. It's got stuff like that. Final Fantasy VIII directly afterwards is about like a broody teenager who's trying to like it's about a broody teenager, child soldier, mercenary guy. But his whole deal is very different from Cloud's, they're sort of even if they're both sort of learning about themselves throughout it.
Mm-hmm.
Squall, who's the protagonist of Final Fantasy VIII, is a lot more grounded in a lot of ways. His sort of thought process is on display all the time. He's not an unreliable narrator. He's just a teenager going through it, and he's trying to pretend that he's sort of pretending to himself that he's older than he is a little bit, or more mature than he is. But his arc is sort of realizing that like no, you can love people too, but it's in a very different way from Cloud's arc, which is sort of more about putting himself together.
Mm-hmm.
And then Final Fantasy IX after that is like, oh, this is a cheery thief guy who's sort of got it all figured out through a lot of the story. Um, and then Final Fantasy X is like, oh, this one is about sports ball jock Titus, or Titus, I guess is the correct way to pronounce his name. Um, and he's got problems with his dad, but he learns some stuff throughout that. Um, and like uh and he's got problems with his dad, and he washes up in another world where shit's bad all the time, but people are still living through it and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're all they're not necessarily in conversation with each other so much as inspired or specifically contrasting against each other in general. Final Fantasy 15 is a fun road trip with the boys for a lot of it, while Final Fantasy 16 is um, about magical racism and like how and about how the main character's life like kind of fucking sucks a lot. But so one's high fantasy, one is again a road trip with the boys. Um, so like there's very specific contrasts and like stuff there, but like Cloud and like you won't find any characters in Final Fantasy VII that are in Final Fantasy VIII, and you won't find any of either that are in Final Fantasy IX or in any of those that are in Final Fantasy X.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they might reference each other a little bit, but like never like in a concrete way.
All
Does
right,
that answer
well,
your question?
definitely. And I don't have any more because we're quite a bit over an hour at this point, and
Oh,
I
damn.
do try to keep them to an hour. But I really appreciate it. This was awesome. I think it really opened my eyes to stuff that I think is pretty incontrovertibly influential on Deltarune. Play Final Fantasy IX. Maybe I will play Final Fantasy IX. It is. I see it does work on Steam Deck, so I might be able to do
Yeah.
that while I'm sitting around watching the Olympics over the next month.
Yeah, I think you'll really like it.
I have to finish another RPG that I'm currently playing that I can't say what
Yeah,
it is on the podcast yet, because it's
gotcha.
for a secret upcoming episode. But maybe
Ah,
after that I'll do it. I don't know. The problem is I keep getting games assigned to me as homework for episodes. So
yeah, it can be pretty rough.
yeah.
Um,
I would like to get to it. I will see if I get to it after mystery game that I'm
yes.
currently playing, which by the way, once you find out what it is, you'll thank me for subjecting myself to it for the show. Um,
All right.
but it's yeah, it was great to get this overview. I hope that folks in the audience appreciate it as much as I did, because I'm sure there's some folks not as familiar. And I mean, I guess if you are a Final Fantasy fan, you probably liked hearing me getting exposed to it. Um,
I
super
know I
super
did.
fun. Thanks for coming on. Is there anything you want to plug before I let you go?
I mean, the main thing I want to plug is if you haven't already, play Final Fantasy IX. It's a very charming RPG. It's very cute. I think like it's you like Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door.
I do. It's my favorite game of all time.
It's like not quite that charming, but it's like pretty close. In my opinion.
All right.
That's it's a game that oozes charm.
And I'm like, and obviously you can't. They like remade it, right? And you can buy it. You can buy that, but it's also it was a PS1 game, so you can emulate it on
Yes.
anything these days as well.
Yes. I think it looks kind of better in like PS1 like pixely ass graphics,
I
honestly,
did.
but
Oh, I
like
never. When I see their remakes, I'm always like, but the original style always seemed a little more charming to me.
yeah. Even Final Fantasy IX has like this thing called a Moguri mod, which like upscales a lot of the background, and it does look really nice. But I even still, I kind of prefer like pixely ass, like crunchy ass Final Fantasy 9 and 8 and 7.
Yeah.
The pixel remasters are, I think they're pretty good with all the graphics, with the exception of the font being like really thin for some reason.
Hmm.
Um, which I think they've like fixed up a little bit. I think there's an option for like a different font, uh but like yeah. Um and then like even 10 has like a weird remaster problem a little bit where like uh but like yeah, you get the idea.
Yep.
um
All right. Well, thanks for listening. I'll see you in the outro.
yeah.
Bye.
All right, everybody, thanks for listening. You can check the link in the description for the slides that Griever was showing me, including some bonus slides that she added after this episode, so be sure to take a look at that. You can support the podcast at the link in the description at groupostrike.net. For just $5 a month, you get access to one bonus episode on a non-Deltarune topic a month. I really appreciate your support. You can also join the Discord at the link there if you'd like to chat about the show and Deltarune. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.
Group Strike Amalgamated General Productions GmbH.